Mariella's here with a health question. Mariella, if you could stand up for us. Another important issue. What have you got?
I work for the Office of the Chief Nursing and Midwifery Officer, and I'd like to ask what you're going to do to support the nursing workforce, in particular Australian nurses as opposed to international nurses, and what you're going to do to support the aged care sector in the rural and remote sector.
A huge question, and you've been asked about this as well, Mr Albanese. How are you going to get all these nurses in to do what you're saying in aged care, that is to have 24/7 care across every centre? How are you going to do it?
One of the things about nurses in the aged care sector, which you'd be aware of, is that some 80% of them in the aged care sector are part-time. And what they want is extra hours as well. So if you put in 24/7 nurses, which is what essentially the Royal Commission said was necessary, putting the nurses back into nursing homes, I think most people would be surprised that there aren't nurses in nursing homes now, because it seems so fundamental. It just seems such common sense. So we need to make sure that that occurs. In addition to that, we have 20,000 additional university places in areas of skill shortage. We need to train up more nurses for the jobs that will become available, because we will need more. We've got an ageing of the population, so we will need more care workers across the board. Our aged care plan isn't something that we've dreamed up. It is something that comes from the Royal Commission, a 5-point plan, 24/7 nurses in nursing homes, 215 minutes of care for our older Australians in nursing homes, better pay for aged care workers, better food and nutrition, and we're going to use Maggie Beer Foundation to assist with that, and better transparency and accountability. We want to make sure that every single dollar that goes in, we know where it's going to. Not going to profits for someone to buy a new Maserati, but going to better food and better care. Because one of the things I found incredibly shocking about the Royal Commission findings is that the interim report found that over half of aged care residents weren't getting the nutrition that they need. They're literally starving. And we had cases like food being scraped up off plates, put in a blender and served the next day as puree. Now, in 2022, we can do better than that.
PM, why has the government not funded 24/7 nurses for aged care facilities?
Well, it was Marielle, is that right? Mariella. And you work as a nurse?
No, I work administration for the Office of the Chief Nursing Midwifery Officer.
There's around almost 50,000 nurses who work in aged care homes across the country, and they do an amazing job. And so, of course, to the 130,000 aged care workers that work in those aged care. I remember when my father was very, very ill and he passed away in an aged care facility, and they made those last months of his life something that I'll always be very grateful for. So I think they do an absolutely amazing job, and you're right to want to ensure that they're getting great support. I called the Royal Commission into aged care because I didn't think the aged care industry, the aged care system was working as it should, as we'd all want. And a key part of it was to ensure that all Australians, particularly as they age, that they can age with dignity. And what the Royal Commission found is that there'd been problems in our aged care system for 30 years, and they're complex and they're difficult problems. We can't just make nurses all of a sudden fall out of the sky and be able to go and meet a 24/7 commitment to have a nurse in every single aged care. Now, we have part of our plan is in 2025, I believe, to be able to achieve that, and hopefully before then. This year, 16 hours a day, because that's how many nurses we can have to go and do that. Now, if you go and make a standard of 24/7 nurses, because you asked me about rural and remote areas, if you make that the standard in aged care facilities right across Australia right now, then you will be closing aged care facilities in rural and regional communities right across the country. There's the best of intentions, I think, right across the parliament to want to be able to do more. $19.1 billion was our response to the Royal Commission to Aged Care. And it did address issues such as nutrition, a $10 a day payment per resident per day, which is now achieving at $12 a day, we're seeing when it's now actually been implemented. So nutrition is important, that care is important. We are training more nurses and we need to train more nurses. But aged care is complex and difficult. There are no simple solutions. You can't all of a sudden say that there's going to be all of these nurses to go in there, because if you make it a standard, then you have to hold that standard. And if you applied that today, you'd be shutting down aged care facilities right across the country.
Mariella, thank you very much for that very important question.
Can I just add something about the workforce? The government did respond to some of the recommendations of the Royal Commission, but the missing pieces were all about workforce. Nothing there except one-off payments to people who are aged care workers. 2 payments, one was supposed to happen in March, the other one in May, but it all ends as soon as people have cast their votes. The truth is that the Royal Commission found that unless we do something about increasing wages of people who are aged care workers, then we won't have a workforce. Unless we do something about addressing the 215 minutes of care, then the pressure that aged care workers that I've spoken to right around the country mean that they'll leave the industry. And that's why we need a plan that includes a plan for workforce. And that's the missing piece that just isn't there in the government's response.
We're going to move on.